everybody, and welcome to another very special board gaming video. Today is going to be another one of these where I'm not going to talk about a lot of very specific games, but rather I'm going to talk about a concept within board gaming. And this is something that's not really very abstract at all. This is something that has been used, and is proven to work very, very well. And that is utilizing board games as teaching and learning tools. Now, for those of you who have seen me for a very long time, you know that years ago, one of the very first videos that I did was actually about board games that you can learn from. And I talked about, just like a bunch of random stuff, including something at the most basic level of if you play wasabi, then you know what kind of stuff is in sushi. Things like that. But today, what I wanted to discuss was more about how we can use board games as real, genuine teaching tools and really learn not only how to work in society, how to be part of society in a better way, but also just like the pure knowledge that you can gain from them. Again, going back to my other video about things that you can learn from board games. So with that, I do have a couple of examples of what I'm talking about here. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'll preface this with I am a scientist. I work in science, so I am extremely biased in that direction as far as what you're learning, how you're learning it, all that kind of stuff, and not all that, but how you're thinking as well. So the two games that I've got are first The New Science, which is a great game that discusses, well, it doesn't really discuss, but it shows you essentially how science functions. It talks about how different parts of science interconnect with one another, and how certain aspects of one science, say for example physics, can help something like me, like a biologist, because you need physics to learn microscopy, things of that nature. Very, very exciting. The other game that I have here is actually a Kickstarter one. Well, no, it wasn't a Kickstarter, but the part of it was anyway. Evolution. Evolution is a really, really fun game that I feel really, really does a great job of demonstrating how the process of evolution functions. And the idea of traits and random mutations and survival of the fittest and all that kind of stuff. Evolution does an incredible job of showing that at a level that is very understandable for pretty much any age. Now, that said, these are more knowledge-based, right? You can learn things about them. The New Science has like random facts about certain scientists, and again, learning the knowledge of how different fields of science interconnect, and on top of that, but how science works as a field in general, as in how you go about, you do your experiments, you try to figure out what's going on, you get your data, and then you try to get it published. Whereas evolution is a little bit more like in-your-face type of knowledge, and again, it works really, really well because you have things not only about traits, the specific traits that you need to survive, you need in order to do some specific thing, all that kind of stuff, but you're also talking about resource management as well, which is another great tool. And with that, I wanted to go right on ahead into one of the more important aspects that I wanted to talk about for this particular video, which is the different skills that you learn. Like I mentioned earlier, one thing that I really like about board games is that it can really honestly help you within society. I know that sounds very, very grandiose, but the fact is it's very true. And I do apologize because this is going to be a little bit of a ranting, rambling, raving type of thing. But suffice it to say, one of the issues that I see a lot as a scientist, as a teacher, as a tutor, as all of these kinds of things that I do, is that a lot of kids don't know how to learn, and it's really unfortunate. With a lot of games, though, you learn a lot of these different types of things. For example, you're talking about tactics and strategy, you're talking about critical thinking, all these kinds of things. What do you do? What is the best move for me right now? What is the best thing that I can possibly do? A really good example that I talked about relatively recently is Orleans. With that game, it's a worker placement game, and you have so many different options. There's so many different things that you can do, and you have to decide, not really on a whim, you do have time to think about it, but you really need to decide what is it that I'm going to do, what will be best for me, not only for the short term, but also for the long term. Critical thinking skills are absolutely vital, very, very important, and you learn those from board games. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of times they're dismissed by a lot of different people, but thankfully, I am within a board gaming community here. There's a very excellent board gaming community here that really a lot of the people actually emphasize using board games as teaching tools. A lot of them are teachers, like Sunday school teachers, and things of that nature, and they've used board games for years as teaching tools for kids. One of the other great things that you can get from board games is teamwork, and not only that, but you can also get, to an extent, morality. So a good example, obviously, is co-op games. You can play something like Pandemic, and then you can see, all right, how are we going to work together? How are we going to make sure that we take care of this, and this in a relatively efficient way? And on top of that, in the end, you just want to win, right? That is the whole point of games like that. And then with morality, that really goes more towards video games. For those of you who don't know, there have been several studies at various universities. I don't remember any off the top of my head, but I'll try to look some up for you. There have been several studies that demonstrate that when you play violent video games of various sorts, then people feel guilty about doing bad things. And it's been shown that people who play these games, they feel guilty about doing some of these atrocious acts that you're doing, and then they come out of it on the other side as actually more moral and have better morals compared to other people, which is, I know it seems somewhat counterintuitive, and everybody is always preaching, "Ooh, violent video games, boo, no!" I mean, obviously you can't really make a similar analogy with board games because most people will not consider board games violent. I guess you could make somewhat of an argument for Cash and Guns, but that's the only one I can really think of off the top of my head. Either way, the point I'm trying to make is that games are excellent teaching and learning tools, not only because you can use them to teach different aspects of, the world. You can use it to get knowledge. One really great example is a whole company called Genius Games, and they focus entirely on making games that are about the world. They're about science, particularly in this case, which obviously I'm a huge fan of. And it's wonderful. It's great to see these kinds of things because the best way for kids to learn is interactively. And if kids can sit there and they're playing a game and they're doing this, that, and the other, then it's like they don't even realize that they're learning, and they still are. They're gaining this knowledge. But I would argue that the more important aspect for board games, especially with younger kids, is the idea of, again, how to really function as an adult, how to function within society, how to think for yourself, how to be independent, all that kind of stuff. And again, I know it sounds really grandiose, but board games really do exactly that. They help you with all those kinds of things. They help you think on your own, figure out what to do on your own, all those kinds of things. Again, it's on a relatively small scale compared to, for example, you move out when you're 18 and it's like, oh, geez, now I'm on my own, what do I do? Like trial by fire type of thing. But at the same time, being able to think about something in like a Tuscany or Viticulture, a game like that, or, even something as comparatively simple as like a Kingsburg, you're still making very important decisions that will potentially impact you for the rest of the time. And not only that, but you're thinking about the other players. What are they going to do? How are they going to do this? How are they going to do that? And trying to read people. And again, these things are very, very important in our world, and many, many kids don't get any sort of education on how to do this. And it's really tragic. So I say that we make more of a push for it into classrooms. However, it doesn't really matter what I think. Like I said, this is just sort of my ranting, raving video about this whole thing. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up because not only am I being somewhat redundant, but that's pretty much all I have to say about it. I hope that you enjoyed this. Again, main points for this: board games, and to an extent video games as well. You're talking about gaining knowledge about numerous subjects, how things work, all this kind of thing. You're talking about critical thinking skills and decision making, which is obviously extremely important in the world in which we live. And then the other thing is really teamwork, because if you're talking about co-op games particularly, then that's what you're learning, how to work with other people, which again, especially in like the business world and things like that, you really, really need. But with that, thank you so very much for being here. I hope that you enjoyed this little video. Obviously, I'm very excited to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Are you teachers? Are you tutors? Are you this kind of thing? Have you used board games? If you have your own kids, do you use board games to help your kids learn and get some of these skills and all that kind of thing? I would love to hear what you guys have to say, as always. So please put anything and everything in the comments below. But with that, thank you so very much for being here, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much again for watching my special board game discussion video on utilizing board games as teaching and learning tools. As I mentioned, I would love to hear any and all thoughts that you have about this. Please put them in the comments below. I would love to have a nice little discussion about it. Do you personally agree with this? Do you think that it's kind of weird? Have you used it yourself? Do you use board games as learning tools? Do you feel that you have learned things yourself by playing board games? Anything and everything like that, please put it in the comments. With that, as always, I've got several of my playlists linked up at the top of the page so that you can see more of my stuff, and you can click the big giant subscribe button so that you can be notified whenever I post new content. But with that, thank you so very much again for being here, and I'll see you next time.